signs of the stars, are coming to be more and more able to create around them proof of what they're doing, and have created devices. And there's all kinds of devices out there that are working that show that this concept is a reality. And, of course, it's being deeply suppressed by all the powers that be. And, of course, they use these own systems in their secret-owned operations to create power and all kinds of ships that, of course, they did not exist.
But it seems like it's getting harder to suppress because of, again, the formal mathematics and also the Internet and low-cost communication and computer graphics. It seems like the word is getting out.
It is. That's why I remain very, very positive about this. Since I've been involved in this whole crazy game for about 3+ decades, maybe only, I'd say really 4 decades when I really got started with, actually 4.5 now, since it's the late part of this particular decade, I have seen more and more how science has had to accept certain basic principles that they fundamentally thought could not be integrated into what they considered to be, quote-unquote, true science.
Well, it's exciting to see a physics that acknowledges infinity, that acknowledges that simultaneously with this Big Bang, there must be also some simultaneous contraction going on, so that everything renews itself, rather than a vision of a universe that's winding down like a spring-loaded clock.
Right. Well, the Newtonian concept of the mechanics of the universe have been changed, and right now that they've discovered dark matter and are working on it, they realize that almost 98% of the universe they don't know anything about, and they're starting to admit that in some articles in some more popular, and I call layman science magazines like Popular Mechanics, etc. They are, or Scientific American or whatever. They're starting to admit more and more that there are basic things that they don't really understand, and that there is actually, they've left in now what they call pre-physics, which is a physics that is totally different than the whole process of what they think of, in other words, from the science created by Newton and his various fellows down to the present time. There's actually another physics that's entirely different, that doesn't work, quote-unquote, by known scientific principles. And to me, this is a gigantic lead-in to what we're talking about here.
Yes. Switching gears a little bit, can you continue to, this is great, the way you're painting these brushstrokes, these broad brushstrokes. What do you see in terms of the evolution of organization? Maybe you could talk a little bit about fluid management. And what do you see in terms of the evolution of individual relationships? I know that as people evolve spiritually, they often find the choices that society is giving them in terms of how to relate, in terms of intimate relationships, family, sexuality. They find the models that are out there now confining. And what do you see evolving in terms of both organizational structure and also relationships in families and sexuality?
Well, first of all, as far as organizations go, we are already beginning what I like to call the grand decentralization model. In other words, these large, massive, global organizations, these multinationals, have been built up based on centralization in certain key areas. In other words, a headquarters or a series of headquarters, and they're in charge of relating how the system operates. What has been happening more and more with corporations, especially those involved in electronics and computers, is they've begun to see that the key to the future of corporations is decentralization. In other words, allowing smaller groups to be in charge of a whole thing, whatever the idea is, from beginning to manufacture and on. And so they are beginning to see that you have to decentralize everything.
Well, it certainly gives them more immediate feedback, and it gives people a sense of ownership and community.
Exactly. And so this is being fed by the rising energies among people for freedom, and also about this rising spirituality path that everyone's on right now. And so what we're beginning to see is an opening up of companies, and those companies that don't open up are running into a lot of problems with their markets, with their marketing, et cetera, and how people think about them. And so what is happening is more and more corporations are seeing that they have to take care of their people, that good people they have to keep, and that the whole process of layoffs, et cetera, it's slowly sinking into corporations, that the traditional model that they've been following for most of the 20th century and into the 21st has to shift. And this also leads to the next thing that I talk about with people is creating a whole new model of how organizations operate. In the stars, they have a thing which they like to call, when we translate it into English, as fluid management. And what it simply means is that the group is organized around those people who are most talented to create a particular task, bring it to fruition, and successfully complete that task after it is manifested, so that it creates the most abilities to help everybody as far as their lifestyle, their standardization of how they look at the life. And so, in other words, constantly bringing out who and what they are in a more and more creative way. And then once that group completes its task, it then supports the next group that is most able with their talents to do the same thing.
Well, this implies, obviously, the evolution of individuals to a much more fluid psychology, a fluid sense of a fluid sense of functioning, so that their sense of identity is rooted in something beyond their function in that moment.
Exactly. And this is what, when we talk about the shift in consciousness, that's promoting this whole model coming forth and bringing with it all the potentials for change that are implied by it. And
maybe
so,
excuse me.
Sure.
I was going to say, maybe you could speak also a little bit to the second part of my question about personal relationships, families, and sexuality, how you see those structures and processes unfolding.
Right. Well, as this change happens, it allows people to look at relationships in a whole different way, a more open way. And this is something that's also happening. The rise of the women's movement on this planet and the whole concept of changing the reality of how we relate to one another is part of this change also. So what's happening is relationships are becoming more open and fluid, and we're not working too much in maintaining a certain box of what people told us the way things are, quote-unquote, supposed to be. This is also changing sexuality on the planet. People are becoming more open to discussing sexuality. One of the ways that people work to control and limit people is limiting the whole realm of what is sexuality, what is it, well, how does it relate to the person, how does it relate to relationships, etc. So this is all changing. And this is something that you're seeing left and right as you look around the planet. Right now it seems somewhat chaotic because of the long suppression of all of this. It kind of is coming at us in strange flashes of this or flashes of that. But it's going to eventually, as the organizational changes happen and as we become more aspectly aware of who and what we are, you begin to redefine. As you begin to redefine yourself, you also begin redefining how you relate to others and how others relate to you. And so this great change is what's happening here. So we're seeing this shift in our society, and it brings with it, at the beginning part of it and into the middle part, which we're in right now, a great deal of chaos. So society right now seems very chaotic. It seems very strange, very odd. But what's happening is we're moving forward. And if you were to look at this in a different way, instead of looking at the negative aspects of it all, but look at the positive aspects for change, you can see how this fluid management aspect that we're talking about is slowly, the different parts of it are starting to manifest and starting to work their ways toward each other.
It seems like allowing yourself to connect with like-minded and like-hearted people during this transition time is going to make the journey a lot more fun and a lot smoother.
Exactly. I would be 100% in full agreement with you, David.
Can you speak a little bit more about how you see the political game unfolding? I think for many of us it's hard to conceive of, given the way the current power dynamics are involved. It's difficult to conceive of how we're going to get from A to B, especially in the U.S.
Well, what is happening here in this particular society is that more and more what I'm seeing is that, like, every political year that's a presidential year, which is the highest of all political years in this country, you see candidates coming forth. And people will get on board with one candidate or another. But what I'm seeing more and more in this world is that, especially the world of American politics, is the rejection of the system and how it operates, and have something different. And before, it was done in a way, it was kind of very